Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file on a figure who I think is just genuinely misunderstood.
I completely agree.
And I don't mean that in some kind of, oh, poor billionaire way. I mean that the public image of him, the perception, is so often diametrically opposed to what the data actually shows. We are talking about Jack Dorsey.
It is such a fascinating case study. I mean, usually when we profile the giants of Silicon Valley, the founders who hit that multi-billion-dollar tier, we see a very specific psychological profile.
Right.
We see the empire builder, the relentless drive to centralize, to acquire, to build the biggest, baddest walled garden possible. You look at a Zuckerberg, you look at Gates back in the 90s, it's all about consolidation of power.
Exactly. The narrative is always, I built the castle and I own the keys.
Yeah.
But Dorsey he's weird. He's an outlier.
Yeah.
He built two massive castles, Twitter and Square, which of course is now Block, and for the last, 5 or 6 years, he seems completely obsessed with melting down the keys and just handing out the scrap metal to strangers.
That is the paradox. That's the central enigma we have to unpack today. You have a man who is, 49 years old now?
49, yeah.
Worth roughly $3.8 billion as of mid-2025. This is a person who fundamentally shaped how the world communicates and how it transacts money. Yet, if you look at his current obsession, this whole freedom technology phase, it's all about dismantling the very structures that made him powerful and rich in the first place.
So what is it? That's the question we have to get to. Is this some kind of guilt? Is it a new galaxy brain strategy? Or, and this is the interesting one to me, is it actually the most consistent thing he's ever done?
I think it's the third one. And to understand that, we have to get past the headlines.
Oh, yeah. The beard, the ice baths, the silent retreats. We have to ignore all that for a minute and actually look at the source code. And we've got a massive stack of sources here. Biographies, corporate filings from the early days of ODO, even the technical architecture of the early Twitter backend, and of course the white papers for the new protocols he's funding.
And when you read through all of that, a really clear picture emerges. You realize you can't possibly understand Twitter, and you definitely can't understand his fascination with Bitcoin without first understanding taxi cabs.
This is what you call the dispatch theory.
It is the unifying theory of Jack Dorsey. It all comes back to dispatch.
Okay, so let's start right there. Part one, the origin story.
Yeah.
Because before he was a tech mogul, before any of that, he was just a kid in St. Louis with a police scanner.
That's exactly it. St. Louis, Missouri, born in 1976. And it was a very traditional Catholic upbringing. He went to Bishop DuBourg High School. Pretty standard stuff on the surface.
But inside the house, it was a little different. His father, Timothy, he wasn't just some generic engineer. He worked on mass spectrometers.
Right. And let's just pause on that for a second, because mass spectrometer is one of those terms we all hear and we just kind of gloss over it.
It sounds complicated.
It is complicated, but what it does is simple to understand. It takes a messy reality, a substance, and it breaks it down into its most precise, data-driven components. It tells you exactly what something is made of.
It's all about granularity.
Precisely. It's about converting the physical world into pure, hard data. And his mother, Marcia, was a homemaker, so she was providing that stable home base for this very observant kid.
And he was observant because he had to be, right? He had a speech impediment when he was young. He was shy.
Very shy. So instead of talking, he just listened. And what he listened to was the city, the pulse of the city itself.
Through the radio waves.
Yeah, he became obsessed with maps, but not static maps. He didn't care about a paper map. He cared about dynamic maps. Yeah. By the time he was 14, he was glued to police scanners, emergency frequencies, taxi dispatch channels.
Now, most people, I think, listen to scanners for the drama. There's a fire on 5th Street or there's a robbery in progress. They want the story.
They want the narrative. Jack didn't care about the narrative at all. He cared about the routing. He was listening to the syntax of the city.
The system.
The system. Think about what a dispatch system actually is. You have hundreds of these autonomous nodes moving around. Police cars, ambulances, couriers, taxis. They're all operating independently.
But they're all reporting back.
They're all reporting back to a central authority with these very short, very structured bursts of data. Unit 1, 1023. Unit 5, en route to Mercy Hospital. Cab 7, heading to Lambert Airport.
It's just a constant stream of two things, state and location.
That's it. It's a real-time database of the physical world. And he wasn't just listening. He started writing software on his early computers to visualize this. He wanted to see the little dots moving on a map on his screen. He was trying to convert the chaotic noise of the radio into a clean, visual interface of the city's pulse.
That's such a crucial insight. He wasn't interested in why the ambulance was going somewhere. He was just interested in the raw fact of its movement and the efficiency of that movement.
Exactly. And that obsession basically drove his entire academic path, or, well, his detours from it. He started at the Missouri University of Science and Technology. Then he transferred to NYU in 1997.
Which makes total sense. If you're obsessed with dispatch, New York City is your mecca.
It's the ultimate dispatch city. The
Yeah.
sheer density of couriers, taxis, delivery services. It's unlike anywhere else in the U.S. at that time. He wanted to be at the heart of the system.
But he never actually finished, did he?
Nope. The classic Silicon Valley dropout trope. He left one semester short of graduating. And we should probably clear something up here. There was a persistent rumor for years that he went to Cornell.
Oh, right. I've heard that.
He's had to correct the record on that personally. He never went to Cornell. It was Missouri, S&T, then NYU, then dropout.
But even before he dropped out, he wasn't exactly, going to frat parties. He was coding. He was trying to get into the system for real.
He was, and he actually hacked his way into a job in a, white hat kind of way. He found a security vulnerability on the website of a major New York dispatching company.
Which one was it?
A company called Dispatch Management Services, run by a guy named Greg Kidd. So Jack finds this hole, and instead of exploiting it, he emails the chairman, Greg Kidd, and basically says, hey, your front door is unlocked. I know how to fix it.
That's a bold resume. Here is how I broke into your house. Now hire me to install the security system.
And it worked. Kidd was impressed. He brought Jack on, and that eventually led him to move out to California. By 2000, he's in Oakland, and he founds his first real startup.
And the goal was?
To dispatch couriers, taxis, and emergency services using the web. Now you have to put yourself in the year 2000. There's no iPhone, no app store. GPS is still this bulky, expensive thing, mostly for military and maritime use.
So the technology wasn't really there yet to support the vision.
The vision was way ahead of the tech. We've seen his notebooks from that era. He was sketching out these ideas for what he called frictionless service markets. He had diagrams of networks for medical devices reporting their status, courier networks.
What's the core idea of frictionless there?
He wanted to remove the human dispatcher entirely. He was thinking, why does a guy in a call center have to tell the taxi where to go? The software should just be able to match the supply with the demand instantly.
That is literally the core pitch for Uber, just a decade too early.
It was Uber without the hardware to support it. So that company didn't take off, the infrastructure just wasn't ready. But during this period of sort of failing and thinking, he had this crossover idea. He was looking at two popular things at the time, AOL Instant Messenger AIM and LiveJournal.
The golden age of the away message.
He loved the away message. Bird pizza, listening to Radiohead, at the gym. He had this flash of insight. He realized an away message is just a dispatch update for a human being.
It's state and location again.
Exactly, it's the same pattern. And he wondered, why can I only show this status to my buddy list? Why can't I just dispatch my life, my status to the entire world?
He wanted to turn every person into one of the little dots on a St. Louis map.
He wanted to visualize the pulse of humanity the same way he visualized the pulse of the ambulances. But again, the idea just sort of sat on a shelf. It was a sketch in a notebook for years. He had bills to pay. Which brings us to 2006 and a failing podcast company.
Odeo.
Odeo. It was a podcasting startup co-founded by Noah Glass and Evan Williams. Now, Evan Williams is a key figure here. He'd already founded Blogger and sold it to Google for a ton of money. He was basically Silicon Valley royalty.
And Odeo was supposed to be his next big thing.
Right. The idea was to make it super easy for anyone to record and share a podcast. But then, in 2005, Apple completely torpedoed their business model.
Right. They released iTunes 4.9 with built-in podcast support.
They ate Odeo's lunch.
Yeah.
Suddenly, their entire reason for being was redundant. So the company was just drifting. They were burning through cash. Morale was in the toilet. So Ev Williams says, okay, everyone break up into teams. Let's have a hackathon. Brainstorm something, anything to save the company.
And that's when Jack dusts off the old dispatch idea.
He pitches it to his little group, which included Noah Glass and a designer named Biz Stone. He describes a service that uses SMS simple text messaging to broadcast short status updates to a small group of friends. He called it 20TR.
With no vowels, which was very trendy at the time. Flickr, things like
A
that.
fairy web 2.0.
Oh,
And we have to talk about the technology here because the limitations of 2006 literally define the product for its first decade.
This wasn't an app you downloaded from an app store.
There was no app store. It was all based on SMS. You would send a text message from your Nokia or your Motorola Razr to a short code number like 4044. Now, the global standard protocol for SMS messaging has a hard character limit.
160 characters.
160 characters. That is a fundamental constraint in the GSM cellular network layer. It's not a design choice, it's a physical limitation of the pipe.
So they needed to reserve some of those characters for the username for routing the message.
Exactly. They decided to reserve 20 characters for the username and commands, which left 140 for the actual content of the message. So that creative constraint that artists and designers love to talk about, the famous 140 characters.
It wasn't an artistic choice, it was just a bandwidth limitation.
It was a technical necessity,
Yeah.
but it had this incredible side effect. It forced brevity, it forced people to communicate in headlines, it stripped everything down to the bare essentials.
So Jack and Diz Stone, they build the prototype.
In 2 weeks. They hacked it together, it was raw, it was simple, and initially, nobody at Odeo got it. The feedback was brutal. Who cares what you're doing right now? Why would I want to know you're eating a sandwich? This is just narcissism.
To be fair, if you look back at the very first tweets, it was mostly, I am eating a sandwich. Jack's first tweet was just setting up my Tweetr.
It was. But then something happened. An earthquake hit San Francisco. And suddenly, people weren't tweeting about their lunch. They were tweeting, did you feel that? Power's out on my street. Everyone okay.
It became a real-time information network.
It became a dispatch system for reality. And as it started to grow, as users started using it in these unexpected ways, the infrastructure just began to crack. It couldn't handle the load. Which brings us to the era of the fail whale.
Oh, that iconic image. The friendly-looking white whale being lifted up by a flock of little orange birds.
Yeah.
It was cute, but what it represented was a catastrophic failure of engineering. What was actually happening under the hood when you saw that screen?
This is so important because it really speaks to the challenges of scaling centralized systems. The early version of Twitter was built on a framework called Ruby on Rails. Now, at the time, Rails was very new and very popular for building websites quickly.
But it wasn't built for this kind of scale.
It wasn't optimized for the kind of massive, read-write, heavy database load that Twitter was generating. It's what's known as a fan-out problem.
Break that down for us. What's fan out?
Okay, so if I have just one follower and I send a tweet, the database has to perform one simple write operation. Here's the tweet, put it in my follower's timeline. Easy. But what if I'm a celebrity with 1 million followers? When I send a tweet, the system has to fan that tweet out and update 1 million different timelines, or at least their indexes, almost simultaneously.
So every popular tweet was like a denial of service attack on their own database.
Essentially, yes. The database locking was a nightmare. They were constantly in firefighting mode, just trying to keep the site online. The fail whale was up more than the service was, it felt like.
And this technical chaos leads directly to the first major turning point in Jack's career, his ousting, his firing.
It does. The official narrative from the board in 2008 was that Jack was an absentee CEO. Evan Williams and the other board members, they looked at the constant server crashes, they looked at the complete lack of a revenue model, and then they looked at Jack's calendar.
And they saw yoga.
They saw yoga classes, they saw fashion design courses at a local apparel art school. They saw him leaving the office at 6 p.m. sharp every day to go learn how to make skirts and draw patterns.
Okay, now, from a strictly corporate governance perspective, if your billion-dollar startup is literally on fire every single day, leaving early to go sew it's not a good look.
It looks terrible. It looks like you don't care. But from Jack's perspective, which he's explained since, he was trying to understand craft. He's always been obsessed with the aesthetics and the utility of a product. He has this famous metaphor where he compares Twitter to a good pair of jeans.
Utilitarian, durable, gets better with age.
Right. And he thought that by learning a physical craft like fashion design, he could better understand how to build a better, more durable digital product. He thought it would make him a better CEO.
The board strongly disagreed.
They fired him. Well, they did the polite Silicon Valley thing. They transitioned him to chairman of the board, which is a powerless ceremonial title. It's the nice way of saying, get out of the way and let the adults handle this. Evan Williams took over as the full-time CEO.
So Jack is in exile. But this exile period is really interesting because he doesn't just go off and sulk. He's still the chairman, he's still involved, and this is when the whole State Department story happens, isn't it?
It is. This is 2009. The Green Revolution is erupting in Iran. Massive street protests are breaking out to dispute the results of the presidential election. The Iranian government, as you'd expect, clamps down hard on state media, on cell service, but the internet is still sort of trickling through.
And Twitter becomes the main organizing tool.
It becomes the primary command and control network for the resistance. People are coordinating protests, sharing videos of police brutality, getting the word out to the world. It was the first time we really saw the term Twitter revolution enter the lexicon.
And right in the middle of all this, Twitter had scheduled some server downtime.
Yes, ironically, to fix some of the very same database issues that got Jack fired. They had a maintenance window scheduled. They were going to take the entire service down for a few hours. And that's when a strictly mid-level official at the U.S. State Department named Jared Cohen sends an email to Jack Dorsey.
And what did the email say?
It essentially said, please do not take the site down right now. The protesters in Iran are using it to organize, to report, to stay alive.
Wow. That has to be a pivotal moment. That's the moment Twitter stops being just a quirky tech company and starts being a genuine geopolitical actor.
Absolutely. Jack gets the email, he forwards it to the right people at Twitter, and they delay the maintenance, they keep the service running, and I think that moment planted a huge seed in his head. He realized that this little dispatch system he built wasn't just for sandwiches and earthquakes, it was a powerful tool for freedom.
But, and this is the crucial part, it was a tool for freedom that he and a small group of people in San Francisco controlled. He had the switch. He had the power to turn it off or keep it on.
The benevolent dictator problem.
Exactly.
And while he was pondering that massive philosophical problem, he went out and built another billion-dollar company from scratch. Which brings us to part 3. Building block, or as everyone knew it then, Square.
And once again, the origin story starts with a simple dispatch problem, a failed transaction.
It does. It's 2009. Jack is out of the day-to-day operations at Twitter. He reconnects with an old friend from St. Louis named Jim McKelvey. McKelvey had actually been his boss at one of his first programming jobs.
And McKelvey had pivoted into a new career, right?
Yeah, he'd become a high-end glass artist, a glass blower. And he calls Jack completely frustrated because he just lost a $2,000 sale for one of his glass faucets.
Why? What happened?
Yeah, the potential customer only had an American Express card, and McKelvey, as a small artist, couldn't get a merchant account that would accept Amex. It was too expensive, too complicated. The customer just walked away.
So Jack hears this story and sees a routing error.
He sees a routing error. The money wanted to move from point A to point B, but the gateway was closed. The system was broken. He looked at the state of payment processing for small businesses at the time.
It was a nightmare. You needed a credit check, you had to pay hundreds in monthly fees, you had to buy or lease a bulky Verifone terminal that needed a dedicated landline. It was totally exclusionary.
It was a gated, centralized system controlled by a few big banks and processors, and Jack's instinct is always to break the gate. So he and McKelvey set out to solve this. And the technology they came up with is just genuinely brilliant in its simplicity.
The little white square reader.
The Square Reader. They didn't try to build a complex new piece of hardware. They had a key inside. They realized that the magnetic stripe on the back of a credit card is just encoded data. It's just information.
And the headphone jack on a smartphone.
Yeah.
It's an input device.
It's an analog audio input. It's designed to listen. So they built a tiny, cheap magnetic read head, that's the little slot in the white square, wired it directly to a standard headphone plug, and then wrote software on the phone to decode the analog signal.
So when you swipe the card, the phone literally hears the data as a screeching sound, like an old dial-up modem.
Exactly. They turned the credit card into an MP3 file, essentially. And the software decodes that screeching sound into the account numbers. By doing that, they bypassed the need for hundreds of dollars of specialized hardware. They could manufacture the readers for pennies.
Which meant they could give them away for free.
And that changed everything. Suddenly, the person at the farmer's market, the coffee shop, the piano teacher, the babysitter, they were all instantly dispatched into the modern financial system.
It's the exact same pattern as Twitter. Twitter allowed anyone to broadcast a message. Square allowed anyone to receive a payment.
He empowers the nodes at the edge of the network. He routes around the central authority. And Square grew exponentially. It was a massive success. They went public in 2015. But you have to notice the date there. 2015 is a critical year in the Jack Dorsey story.
Because that's the year Twitter came calling again.
Twitter had been drifting under its CEO at the time, Dick Costolo. The stock was stagnant, user growth had stalled, the product hadn't really evolved. The board, perhaps realizing they'd made a huge mistake years earlier, went back to Jack hat in hand and asked him to come back as CEO.
But he laid down a condition. He refused to quit Square.
He demanded to be the CEO of two publicly traded companies at the same time, which, I mean, that's almost unheard of. Elon Musk does it now with Tesla and SpaceX and X, but at that time, Wall Street viewed it as complete insanity.
So how on earth did he manage it? Two massive companies.
Through a rigorous, almost robotic scheduling system, he themed his days. He would literally work at the Twitter office in the morning, then walk across the street to the Square office in the afternoon.
Or the themes.
Monday was for management meetings at both companies. Tuesday was for product meetings at both companies. Wednesday was marketing, and so on. It was an incredible feat of executive time management and, frankly, mental processing power.
But this second term at Twitter, from 2015 to 2021, this is where things get really complicated. This is where the technological monk starts to face the demons of his own creation.
He was walking back into a very different internet. The internet of 2015 was not the fun, quirky internet of 2006. The culture wars had begun in earnest. Disinformation was being weaponized by state actors. And Twitter, under the previous leadership, had made a fundamental architectural change that Jack would later come to regret more than anything else.
They introduced the algorithmic feed.
Yes. Explain that shift for us, because it's so fundamental to understanding the problems of social media today.
Originally, your Twitter timeline was simple. Reverse chronological. You saw the newest tweet from the people you followed at the very top. It was a raw, unfiltered feed of information.
Like a stock ticker.
Exactly. Yeah. But in the race for engagement, to keep your eyeballs glued to the app for longer so they could sell more ads, they switched to a relevance-based model. The algorithm would start guessing what you wanted to see based on your past behavior. It would surface the most popular or controversial tweets and put those at the top.
This is the move that creates the echo chambers. The algorithm learns that I get really angry about a certain topic, so it just starts feeding me more and more outrage about that topic, because outrage drives clicks and replies.
Correct. It optimizes for emotional reaction, not for informational accuracy or diversity of thought. And years later, in 2022, after he had left, Dorsey wrote this incredible post-mortem on it all. He said, and I'm quoting here, "The biggest mistake I made was continuing to invest in building tools for us to manage the public conversation versus building tools for the people using Twitter to easily manage it for themselves."
Wow. That's a profound admission of guilt, almost. He's saying, we, the company, took the power away from you, the user, and gave it to our own engineers and our own algorithms. And that centralization of power, that decision to manage the conversation, collided head-on with the political phenomenon of Donald Trump.
The Trump presidency. This was the ultimate stress test for Twitter's entire philosophy.
It was. You had a sitting U.S. president using the platform as his primary communication tool, bypassing the entire traditional media establishment. And in doing so, he was frequently posting things that, for any other user, would have been clear violations of Twitter's own terms of service regarding bullying, harassment, or misinformation.
So Jack had a meeting with Trump in 2019 at the White House.
He did. And the readout from that meeting is just fascinating. Apparently, Trump spent a significant portion of the time complaining that his follower count was dropping. He was convinced that Jack was personally shadow banning him to hurt him politically.
And what was Jack's response?
Jack calmly explained that the company was just purging millions of bot and spam accounts from the platform, and that all major accounts, including his, were losing some followers as a result. But for years, Dorsey defended the decision to keep Trump on the platform, even when the pressure was immense. He created something called the world leader exception.
What was the argument there?
The argument was that the public has a right to know what their leaders are saying, even if it's controversial or factually incorrect. That it's more dangerous to deplatform a world leader and drive their speech into the shadows than it is to let it exist in the open where it can be debated and fact-checked.
That was the policy until January 6th, 2021.
After the attack on the U.S. Capitol, the internal calculus at Twitter changed. The risk of imminent real-world violence was deemed to outweigh the newsworthiness of the tweets. They made the decision to permanently suspend Donald Trump's account. And Jack, as CEO, signed off on it.
But he didn't celebrate it, which I think a lot of people expected him to.
No, not at all. And this is where people on both sides of the aisle completely misread him. Liberals were cheering, thinking he'd finally seen the light. Conservatives were furious, screaming about censorship. And Jack was, well, he seemed mournful about it.
Mournful.
He posted this long thread a few days later saying that while he believed it was the right decision for public safety at that moment, it was also a failure of their platform to promote healthy conversation, and he called it a dangerous precedent.
He realized that if one CEO in San Francisco can unilaterally silence the President of the United States, then that CEO simply has too much power.
And if there's one thing we've established, it's that Jack Dorsey fundamentally distrusts centralized power, even when it's his own.
So he's had this realization. He's seen the monster that his creation has become. What happens next?
In November 2021, he resigns. He posts his resignation email on Twitter. He says the company is ready to move on from its founders. He hands the reins over to the CTO, Parag Agrawal, and just walks away.
But he doesn't retire to an island. He immediately rebrands Scared of Lock, Inc., and pivots hard into what you call part 4 of his story, the decentralization maximalist.
This is the part that just completely confuses the mainstream business press. He stops talking about quarterly earnings and ad revenue and starts talking about cryptographic protocols. He goes from being a tech CEO to being essentially a Bitcoin evangelist.
To Jack, Bitcoin isn't just a speculative asset to trade. It's something much more profound. He calls it freedom money.
He does, and we have to understand the connection in his mind.
So why? What's the link between a dispatch system for taxes and a decentralized digital currency?
Go back to the map. In a centralized banking system, the one we all use, the bank is the dispatcher. They sit in the middle. They decide if your transaction is valid. They can freeze your account. They can reverse a transaction. They have control.
Okay.
In Bitcoin, there is no central dispatcher. The network itself is the dispatcher. It relies on a mathematical concept called proof of work.
Can you break that down for us in simple terms?
Proof of work just means that in order to validate a block of transactions and add it to the blockchain, a computer, a miner, has to expend real-world energy. It has to solve a very difficult but verifiable mathematical puzzle. No single person or company controls this process. It's a consensus mechanism run by thousands of independent computers all over the world.
And Jack loves it because it's permissionless.
That's the key word. You don't need a passport or a credit score or a bank's permission to use Bitcoin. All you need is a private key. He sees it as the native currency of an open internet.
Now, we have to touch on the internet conspiracy theories here. There are persistent rumors that Jack himself is Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous creator of Bitcoin.
It's a very fun theory to entertain. I mean, he has the deep cryptographic background. You have to remember the early dispatch services he built were all about secure, encrypted communication. He certainly has the cypherpunk philosophy of privacy and decentralization, and he was in the right place at the right time.
So do you think it's true?
I would say it's highly, highly unlikely. During the critical period when Satoshi was actively coding and writing about Bitcoin, from 2008 to 2010, Jack was in the middle of getting fired from Twitter and launching Square. He was a little busy. But spiritually, I think he sees himself as Satoshi's most important disciple. He's on record saying he believes Bitcoin is one of the most important developments for the future of world peace.
World peace. That is a very big claim for a digital currency.
It sounds hyperbolic, but his argument has a certain logic to it. His argument is that most major wars are funded by governments endlessly printing money, devaluing their currency to pay for armies and weapons. If a government had to operate on a sound money standard like Bitcoin that they couldn't inflate, it would be much harder to fund perpetual conflict. It's an anti-war technology in his view.
And he's putting his company's money and his own money where his mouth is. He funded a project called Ocean.
Right. Ocean is a Bitcoin mining pool. See, one of the problems Bitcoin has right now is that the mining process itself is becoming more centralized. A few huge publicly traded companies control a massive percentage of the global hash rate.
Which creates a new central point of failure.
It does. If those few companies were ever to collude or be forced by a government to do so, they could theoretically censor certain transactions. Ocean is what's known as a non-custodial mining pool. It allows small individual miners to pool their resources and earn rewards without ever giving up control of their hardware to a central operator. It's about decentralizing the decentralization.
And then there's the other side of it. He gave up on Twitter as a company, but he clearly didn't give up on the idea of social networking. He just thinks it shouldn't be a company.
This brings us to the whole Bluesky versus Nostr saga. It's really revealing.
Right. Bluesky was his own project, started inside Twitter.
He started Bluesky at Twitter in 2019 with the goal of building an open, decentralized social media protocol. The long-term vision was that Twitter itself would eventually just become one of many clients that could plug into this open standard.
But after he left Twitter, Bluesky spun off into its own independent company.
It did. It took on venture capital funding, it formed a public benefit corporation, it appointed a board, which Jack sat on, and it started doing all the things companies do. It started building centralized moderation tools.
It started acting like Twitter.
And Jack hated it. He grew disillusioned. In May of 2024, he very publicly left the Bluesky board. He deleted his account and said they were repeating all the mistakes we made at Twitter. He doesn't want a better, more decentralized Twitter. He wants no Twitter. He wants a protocol, not a platform.
So he pivoted all his support and energy to Nostr.
Nostr, which stands for Notes and Other Stuff Transmitted by Relays.
It's a terrible name.
It's a terrible name, but the concept is what matters to him.
So what makes it fundamentally different from Bluesky or Twitter?
Nostr isn't a platform. It's a protocol, just like email or HTTP are protocols. No single person or company owns email, right? You can use Gmail, I can use Outlook, a company can run its own server, and we can all still talk to each other.
Right. Interoperable.
Nostr is the same for social media. There is no central Nostr server. There's no Nostr Inc.
So where does the data actually live?
It lives on a network of independent relays. Anyone can run a relay. You can run one on a cheap computer in your basement. When I want to post a message, I sign it with my private cryptographic key. That's my uncensorable identity. And I send it out to a handful of relays that I like. Your app, your client, just connects to those same relays and pulls my message down.
So if a relay owner decides, I don't like what this person is saying, and they ban you from their relay, what happens?
Nothing, really. I just start sending my messages to different relays. My identity isn't tied to any one server. It's tied to my cryptographic key. It is designed from the ground up to be censorship resistant.
And he's even thinking beyond the internet now. He's been talking about Bluetooth mesh networks.
This is the most radical step. This is for a situation where the internet itself goes down. Imagine a large protest where a government decides to shut down all the cell towers and cut off internet access. Bluetooth mesh allows phones to talk directly to each other, peer-to-peer.
Like a daisy chain of data.
A digital bucket brigade. My phone talks to your phone, which talks to the phone next to you. It creates a local ad hoc network with no central infrastructure at all. He funded an app in 2025 called BitChat that uses this technology. It is dispatching without a dispatcher. It is the ultimate realization of that teenage dream of watching dots move on a map. But now, with no central tower controlling them.
It's incredible how consistent the core philosophy is, from a scanner in St. Louis all the way to blockchain protocols. But we have to look at the man himself, part 5, because the way he lives his life is just as intense and just as extreme as the software he funds.
Yeah, we have to talk about the technological monk persona, because it's not just an act. He lives in Seacliff, a beautiful neighborhood in San Francisco, has a $10 million compound overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. But by all accounts, inside that house, he lives like an ascetic.
The meditation is a huge part of it.
A huge part. He practices Vipassana meditation. And we need to be clear, this isn't the kind of mindfulness you do on a 5-minute app. This is an ancient, rigorous, demanding tradition. In late 2017, he did a 10-day silent retreat.
Walk us through what that actually entails.
It's intense. You wake up at 4 a.m., you meditate something like 10 hours a day. You're not allowed to eat after midday. No reading, no writing, no phones, no music. You don't even make eye contact with the other people there. You are completely and totally alone with your own mind for 10 straight days.
For a guy whose brain seems to be wired for constant, high-speed data inputs, that must have been excruciatingly difficult.
He said it was one of the most painful and difficult things he's ever done, but he believes it's necessary to, in his words, hack his own brain, to debug his own mental source code and see the world as it really is.
But that intense inward focus can have a huge blind spot. It can backfire. We have to address the Myanmar trip.
We do. In 2018, for his birthday, he went to Myanmar to do another one of these meditation retreats. And when he came out, he tweeted about how beautiful the country was, how peaceful and kind the people were.
And he posted this at the exact same time that the Myanmar military was in the middle of conducting a brutal genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority.
It was a massive, unforced PR disaster. Critics, I think, rightfully pointed out that his own platform, Twitter, had been used as a tool to spread hate speech and incite violence against the Rohingya. And here he was, the CEO, essentially promoting tourism to the country without even acknowledging the atrocities that were happening.
It suggests a kind of profound tunnel vision. He was so focused on achieving his own internal silence that he completely tuned out the screams of external suffering.
That is the dark side, the shadow side of that monk archetype. An extreme level of detachment can start to look a lot like indifference.
Let's pivot to his politics, though.
Yeah.
because you absolutely cannot put him in a simple box.
Oh, he's a complete nightmare for political pundits who want to label everyone. In the 2020 Democratic primary, he donated to two candidates, Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang.
Both Democrats, but both definite outsiders. Yang, of course, was a universal basic income candidate, and UBI is a huge passion for Jack.
Right. But then, fast forward to 2024, and he very publicly endorses Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president.
Who is the ultimate anti-establishment chaos agent. RFK Jr.'s entire platform is built on challenging the pharmaceutical industry, the intelligence agencies, the mainstream media, basically questioning every official narrative. And Jack loves that questioning spirit.
But here's the twist. At the same time he's supporting RFK Jr., he donates $10 million to Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research, founded by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi,
The leading academic scholar of what's often called critical race theory.
Exactly. So on one hand, you have RFK Jr., and on the other, you have Ibram X. Kendi. Most people would look at that and see a complete contradiction, a political schizophrenic. But I think in Jack's mind, it's perfectly consistent.
How do you square that circle?
They are both, in their own ways, challenging the system. Kendi is challenging the systemic power structures of race in America. RFK is challenging the systemic power structures of government and corporations. Jack is fundamentally anti-centralization. He will support anyone he sees as trying to break up the big, monolithic blobs of power.
He's also tweeted in support of the Gaza war protests and even drew parallels to the Vietnam and Iraq war protests. He's very consistently anti-war.
Because war is the ultimate, most violent expression of the centralized state. He's a libertarian in the truest nonpartisan sense of that word. He trusts individuals over institutions every single time.
And that trust in individuals is the driving force behind his philanthropy, right? The Start Small initiative.
This is one of the most interesting things he's done. It's April 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic is just starting to explode globally. Jack takes $1 billion of his equity in Square, which at the time was about 28% of his total net worth, and he moves it into a new entity.
But it wasn't a typical foundation.
No. He didn't create a 501c foundation, which comes with a board of directors, huge overhead costs, and a slow bureaucratic process. He moved it into a simple LLC, a limited liability company.
What's the practical difference there?
An LLC is just a company. He is the sole member. He can write a check to anyone for any reason in 5 minutes. It's agile. And he did something truly radical for transparency.
The Google Sheet.
The Google Sheet. He tweeted out a public link to a Google spreadsheet. It's called the Start Small Tracker. You can go look at it right now. It is a line-by-line public ledger of every single donation he has made from that $1 billion.
So you can see it all. $10 million to the Reform Alliance for Criminal Justice Reform, $20 million to CORE for COVID relief, $15 million for oxygen concentrators for India. Yeah. It's all just there.
Why a Google Sheet? Because it's the dispatch aesthetic again. It's raw data. It's not a glossy annual report or a press release. It's just a ledger. He wants you to see the real-time flow of the money unvarnished.
And a huge amount of that money, as you mentioned with Andrew Yang, goes to universal basic income experiments.
A huge amount. He's the primary funder for a group called Mayors for Guaranteed Income. He believes that the most efficient and dignified way to help people isn't to create a complex top-down welfare bureaucracy. That's just another centralized dispatcher.
He wants to just give people the money.
Just give them the cash, a direct peer-to-peer transfer, and trust them to solve their own problems in their own way. He trusts the nodes at the edge of the network more than he trusts the hub in the center.
So if we pull the lens back, we have this incredible picture of a man who spent the first half of his career building these massive centralized systems to route information and money, and is now spending the entire second half of his career trying to build the tools that will make his own original creations obsolete.
He wants to abdicate the throne he built. He wants to be the technological monk who writes the code, sets it free in the world, and then disappears back into the meditation hall.
But we have to end with the hard question. Is he right?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar gamble of the 21st century.
Because we have seen what happens on largely unmoderated, decentralized platforms. You get floods of hate speech. You get coordinated harassment campaigns. You get state-sponsored bot armies. You get chaos. If you remove the dispatcher, if you fire all the trust and safety teams, does society actually function? Or does it just crash and burn?
Jack's argument would be that the crash isn't caused by freedom. It's caused by the centralized engagement-based algorithms that are manipulating us and amplifying the worst aspects of human nature for profit. He truly believes that if you give people tools that they own and control, where they can choose their own algorithm or have no algorithm at all, that rationality and good faith will eventually return.
He has a deep, almost religious faith in the wisdom of the crowd in its purest, most unfiltered form.
He trusts the nodes, full stop.
It's a beautiful vision. Maybe it's a naive vision. Maybe it's the only way forward. But when you look at the world we live in right now, a world of AI-generated deepfakes, of pervasive information warfare, the idea of taking all the guardrails off seems terrifyingly risky.
It is incredibly risky, but Jack looks at the alternative, a world where a Mark Zuckerberg or an Elon Musk or a government bureaucrat gets to be the final arbiter of what is true, and he thinks that is the far greater danger.
So he's essentially handing out the matches and hoping we collectively decide not to burn the house down.
Or he's hoping we realize we can use the fire to cook dinner and warm ourselves.
It's a story that's still being written. And whether he is Satoshi or not, he is certainly the most Satoshi-like public figure we have. He embodies that spirit.
He is the ultimate anti-CEO.
We covered a ton of ground today. Mass spectrometers in St. Louis, silent retreats in Myanmar, the architecture of the blockchain.
We didn't even get to really deep dive on his acquisition of the music streaming service title, but that's a whole other story about empowering artists. Maybe for another day.
I think the final thought, the thing for you, the listener, to take away from this is to just look at the digital tools you use every single day. Look at your social media feed, your bank account, your messaging apps, and ask yourself, who owns the map? Who is the dispatcher? And is it time you started dispatching yourself?
That's the question he wants everyone to ask.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.